Today we're going to use some water. I'm going to use watercolors, but there's also a way to do this with crayon. And it is a wintry picture of birch trees on an evening. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is, what the picture's going to end up being is going to have a blue background, like a dark blue evening light kind of background. And you're going to have birch trees where you're just seeing the trunks. Okay. Birch trees are the type of trees that have that white bark, kind of has lines through it. So we're going to make it look that way. And your paper is white. So we're not going to see the stump of the tree or the tops of the trees, and it's winter, so there's no leaves on the trees. We're just seeing like a section of the trunk. So I'm going to draw some lines here that are going to end up being the trunks of my trees. And I don't want them to all be the same. So I'm going to make some of them skinnier than others. I'm also going to change how far away they are from each other. So, because it's going to be kind of like in a forest. It's not necessarily, you know, lined up planted trees. Okay. So I'm going to put a skinnier one over here. And they may also have some branches that come out. So I'm going to actually show a few branches on birch trees kind of come out in this way. I'm going to show just a few skinny branches coming out. Make the base of that a little wider. So, one more over here. Okay. Now, these are the trunks of my trees. I'm going to leave those white for now. And the first thing I'm going to do with my paints, and if you have crayons, there's a way to do it with crayons. And so at the end, I'll show you what you would do with crayons. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some water into my blue because I want my blue to kind of wake up. And so I have to soak it with water. And then, once it seems a little soaked, I'm going to paint in between my trees with my blue. If I want my blue to look a little bit more like a midnight color, then I can add a little bit of black to it. But I would do that in the tray of my paints over here, not in the blue, because I don't want to mess up the color of my paints. Right? So I'm going to make it just a little bit darker. Okay. Okay, so I completed painting my background, and I went all the way to the edge. When I went along the edges of my trees, I had to make sure that I went really smooth and straight because birch trees are really pretty straight trunks, and I wanted to go right up to my pencil line or a little over so that they look really straight and it looks really clean. They're really pretty smooth bark. They're not bumpy. Okay. The next part is you're going to use your black, and you can make a little puddle of black over here. It'll be kind of a gray, which means you're just going to add a little bit more water to it. And what you're going to do is in the bark of a birch tree, there's these lines, these horizontal lines every once in a while. And they look kind of like this. Like once I draw one, you're probably going to go, oh yeah, I've seen a tree like that, right? And they're not totally uniform, meaning they're not like an equal distance apart. There might be a real long one next to a short one. So every once in a while, there is like just this kind of a crack, it looks like, in the white bark. And if you get a real close-up look to it, you can see that it looks kind of like this. Now I'm going really carefully close to my blue because I don't want it to run off into my background. Okay, I want it to stay within the bark of the tree. Okay. And I'm going to do that to each tree. Some of them might be kind of thicker lines than others. The bigger the tree, the thicker the line's going to be, right? And it might even look, you know, on those bigger trees, it might make the tree look like it's a little closer to where I am. Okay. Okay, so I completed my lines within my bark, And I see a few spots where I might need a little bit more, because even on these small branches, there would be these lines, okay? Now I need that to dry before I go on to the next part, okay? So I'm gonna let that dry. Okay, it's starting to dry. It's still a little bit damp, but I'm gonna show you the next part. You just don't want it to be all puddly and drippy. It shouldn't be that way anyway. I have not used watercolor paper, and you'll notice that when you don't use watercolor paper, you get these kind of like these ripples in the paper. But what you can do to take care of that is you kind of ignore it while you're working, but then when you're all done and your paper is really dry, you flatten it in a book and it will flatten out really nicely, okay? So the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to use black, make a puddle of black in my paints with a lot of water, okay, because I want it to come out kind of gray. And what we're going to do is pretend that the moon is coming from this direction, and it's lighting, the moonlight is lighting this side of the trees. So this side ends up with a shadow, right? And we're going to draw that shadow, or paint that shadow up the side of the tree. And at first it'll be like, wait a minute, it looks like we're ruining our tree, but we're not. And when you're done, you'll see. So I make that stripe all the way up. I don't want it to blend into my blue too much, so I have to be really careful that it doesn't just kind of bleed into my blue. But what ends up happening is it ends up looking more like a three-dimensional tree, more round, because now you've created a shadow. Okay, I would do it on the edge of that branch, and also here on the side of the tree. Okay, all the way up. And it might even end up being like half the tree that ends up in a shadow. Okay, I have to make some more of that. I don't want it to be too dark. You can always make it darker, right? Then I go up, all the way up, on each tree. And you can see how it makes them look a little bit more three-dimensional. Go up the side of this branch and up to here. Right? You can even, to make it spread a little bit around, because it wouldn't be this defined line, you can paint with just water up the edge of that, where you overlap the white and the water and the gray, and it makes it blend a little bit with the tree. Okay. And one more. Okay. I'm going kind of quickly, but you can go as slow as you want. I'm going to blend it just a tad with some water, just on the inside, so it will spread this way. And that makes it look a little bit more three-dimensional, like the moonlight. It looks like the moonlight or some sort of light is shining onto the trees in this direction, and then this part is in a shadow. When you're all through and it's all dry, you would do your name with pencil or with a black pen, do your name or your initials here in the corner. And this art, it reminds me of the art that's in the book Owl Moon. And it just looks like a quiet, wintry, very cold night. So have fun with that. I forgot to tell you that there's a way to do this project with crayon as well. So what you would do is you would draw your trees like we did in the beginning, but then your background would be blue. You would choose a dark blue, pressing really hard. You could use different blues in different parts, so it looked a lot like a night sky. I wouldn't use black though. I would use some form of a darker blue. And then with a gray crayon, make the lines for your trees in the bark, and then with that same gray crayon, do your shadow that would be on this side of the tree. That's how you would do it with crayon, or you could even use oil pastel. Have fun!